Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in just a few minutes. Let some more folks jump in when they have a chance. So we'll start in just a few moments. All right, welcome again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Mike Milsey. I'm the Deputy Director in the Office of Equity and Engagement for the Chicago Police Department. And again, just thank you to everyone who's joining our webinar tonight on the Police Department's community-focused policing project. We're very excited and grateful for you all to join us this evening. So we're going to go ahead and get started and have a great presentation for everyone tonight. I'm looking forward to questions that folks have. For the webinar this evening, if folks do need captions, there is an option at the bottom of your screen to either turn on or to turn off any captions that you may need. And then there is also a Q&A function. If at any point throughout the presentation this evening, you have any questions that you're hoping to ask or look to get answered this evening, please feel free to put that in the Q&A section. We do have time at the end of the webinar to answer as many questions as we can and try to get through as much as we can. So to get us started, I'm going to introduce Chief Angel Novales.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to introduce myself, Chief Angel Novales with the Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform, and fortunate enough to have been assigned this project on community policing, which I've had the opportunity to serve and know how important it is to communities out there. We're very excited to share with you an update on our efforts to advance community-focused policing across the department, how it's been informed by internal and external feedback, and what our next steps are going to be. Here's what we plan for you in today's discussion. First, we're going to hear from First Deputy Superintendent Yolanda Talley, who has been a champion of our community-focused policing since she was a police officer, and I had the great fortune of meeting her on another community policing project when she was the commander in the Austin neighborhood. After that, we'll hear insights from the reports that were released last week, delivered by the partners who helped craft them. Then we'll turn it back over to CPD to give an update on our next steps in this work, including how the community policing project complements the workforce allocation study. Finally, we'll be answering questions from the audience. For now, it's an honor, it's a privilege to get started, and I am going to introduce our First Deputy Superintendent, Yolanda Talley. First Deputy, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm First Deputy Superintendent Yolanda Talley, and thank you to everyone who is joining us to learn more about how we are advancing community-focused policing in the city. Building stronger partnerships with the communities we serve is a priority for the Chicago Police Department. Public safety cannot rest solely on the shoulders of the police department. We know that to strengthen safety in our neighborhood citywide, our residents must be involved. Community policing has been a long-standing program within our department, but we are now expanding what it means to truly be community-focused. This means that every CPD member, regardless of assignment, holds the responsibility of building relationships and trust amongst their fellow Chicagoans. As someone who was raised in the city of Chicago, I know firsthand the importance of officers being in the community and creating community. Throughout my career, I have made sure to meet the community where they are at. As police officers, we have to lead with empathy. I especially know how important it is to see this mindset come from leadership down. When officers see their supervisors and fellow officers proactively building relationships in our neighborhoods, the goal is they are encouraged to do so as well. This is the kind of community-focused policing we need to see across every bureau and every assignment at Chicago Police Department. You don't need to be assigned to the Office of Community Policing to do that. This is also what our residents want to see from us. We know that as we re-envision what community policing is, we have to hear directly from our residents about what they want to see from us. Throughout the past 9 months, we have solicited feedback from residents that reflect a shared desire for relationship building and problem solving to be something all Chicago Police Department members are responsible for. It's something we want to do. We want our officers to be guided by community-focused policing in all that they do. We want community-focused policing to be in their hard set, mindset, and skill set. With this in mind, we are now working to integrate this in our day-to-day operations. As we move forward, we are continuing to gather community feedback and make sure our residents are included in this process. We are working on a staffing model that would align with this vision, but we will also take into account the workforce allocation study that should be concluded at the end of the year. This workforce allocation study is looking at our staffing throughout the department and developing a data-driven and geography-driven workforce allocation model. There's a lot more to be done, but let me be clear. We are committed to working with our community members across Chicago to grow our department. This is an investment in our future as a city. I will now turn it back over to Chief Angel Navales to share more about the feedback we received.
Thank you, First Deputy Superintendent, and to the folks on the call. One of the things that makes me excited about this project is the fact that it wasn't built in-house just by us. This is a project that is driven by community feedback, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now. Over the last 9 months, several partners have supported the department to gather feedback and insight, both internally and externally. There was 8 community-based organizations who were selected through an open application process that led 29 engagement sessions across the city, reaching more than 700 community members. To complement that perspective, the Civic Consulting Alliance conducted focus group of community representatives, the District Advisory Councils, or what we call the DAC chairs, the Chicago Police Advisory Panel, our CPAP panel, commissioners from the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability, district counselors, and consent decree coalition members. The Civic Consulting Alliance also conducted interviews and focus groups with nearly 150 members across the department. Comprehensive, we're talking about every rank. So we had commanders, deputy chiefs, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, officers. That was done to ensure that we heard all perspectives. National leaders on constitutional policing conducted national research on leading community policing practice in 17 departments across the country. Their team included Kathy O'Neill. She was the commissioner in Boston. She was superintendent in Seattle. And our very own Chuck Ramsey started here in Chicago and went on to be the police commissioner in Washington, D.C. So if you look at the slide that's in front of you, you can look at how we not only had the 8 community-based organizations blanketing the city of Chicago to get as much input as possible, but if you look at the number 2 on the slides, you can see that not only that they talk to chiefs, deputy chiefs, they talk to the superintendent who providing guidance on this. They talk to captains, commanders, sergeants, lieutenant, those people that serve you on a day-to-day basis. Slide 4, please. All right, so you can see here the types of questions that were asked to gather feedback from community members and CPD members. Questions for communities focused on policing practices, such as what did the residents want to see from police in their communities. questions for CPD were focusing on understanding the perceptions or what the current state of community policing is, as well as future goals, right? So if we look at some of the questions that were asked, they ask questions to communities such as, do you feel safer in your neighborhood? And what role do the police play in your sense of safety? Right, we looked at things such as, is there too little or too much or not enough police presence and interaction with residents in the community? So what we wanted to do was get a very, very fulsome view of what perceptions were. With our members, we asked them, how would you explain community policing at CPD right now? What works about the way CPD approaches community policing, and what are the opportunities for improvement? The goal is to put together a community policing initiative that is more efficient, more effective at serving members of our communities. Slide 5, please. This is what I'm incredibly excited to talk about. So there's 4 reports that I would just want to touch a little bit upon. We're committed to transparency. We wanted to ensure that all these reports were released to the public. That was done last week with links available on the CPD website. We now have authors of the reports. They're going to share out key takeaways from each. And before I turn over to Mike Milstein, please, the insight gained by these 4 reports is eye-opening. It's going to help guide the direction that we go. So if anybody on this call has the opportunity, please visit our website, look through the reports. That way, when you participate in the next engagement, you are better versed and you can help craft questions that are going to help guide us to serve the public better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Mike Milstein so we can hear from those CBOs and let you know what they found. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Chief. And like the Chief mentioned, these reports are available online. They are also available in both Spanish and Chinese. Additional languages are also in process for translations as well. So to talk more about each of the reports, I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Rosemary Dominguez from the Resurrection Project. We really, all of the community-based agencies did a ton of really incredible and amazing work. We really could not do this without them. I mean, I could go on and on about how amazing they are. So to represent all of them tonight, really excited to have Rosie on. So I'll pass it over to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Again, my name is Rosemary Dominguez, and I'm with the Resurrection Project. I'm here to talk about, I'm here representing one of the 8 phenomenal organizations who were part of the first phase on the community engagement component, where, again, as Chief Angel Novales mentioned, that we received over 770 Chicago residents who participated via 29 sessions. Those were open to the public, but also held privately as well, virtually and in person. In addition, with also reaching out to folks who completed the survey, and that was about 246 responses we received as well. Again, discussing how we can shape, or how the City of Chicago and the Chicago Police Department can implement community engaged policing and alternative response strategies. And so some of those key themes, one revolving around community engaged policing. Residents preferred the term community engaged policing over community policing to emphasize relationship building over enforcement. And so there was this desire for visible proactive presence, such as foot and bike patrols, engagement within schools and outside events, building trust through empathy, cultural competency, and de-escalation tactics, as well with training priorities. Many residents wanted to have CPD officers focus more on trauma-informed care, mental health, bias reduction, and just overall communication skills when being approached by everyday residents. And then, of course, feedback loops, right? And so what this means, residents wanted to see ongoing two-way communication with CPD, not just one-time meetings or surveys where they can provide input on safety issues or police behavior, and see how that input can be used in decision-making. And ultimately, like, trying to eliminate from this conversation or mindset with us versus them, right? Because this is a collective means we had to engage together to address the needs in our neighborhoods. And so another component was regarding the alternate response strategies. Many residents showed mixed feelings about who should respond to 911 calls, but generally supported triaged and co-responder models, meaning that it's not just an officer being dispatched, but also a medical health professional or clinician being dispatched as well. And so with some of the responses regarding mental health and well-being checks, residents often preferred a non-police or a joint response. In regards to traffic and property damage, use of non-sworn personnel to reduce inefficiencies is what residents felt like would is what they felt would be better. And so they felt that it's inefficient to send sworn police officers who are trained for high risk or violent situations to respond to routine or non-emergency incidents. And then in regards to noise and loitering or trespassing, there were nuanced approaches where residents felt like you could use mediators, social workers, or co-responder teams as well. And so when discussing all of this and how we can consider moving forward, many residents felt that a one-size-fits-all approach would not work in a diverse city like Chicago and communities, and knowing that our communities and neighborhoods have different languages, cultures, issues, and needs. The city and CPD should design public safety and engagement strategies that reflect each neighborhood's unique identity, whether that's how officers are deployed, what languages are spoken, or which community partners are involved. And then secondly, institutionalized community feedback loops. So again, this is about making community voice a permanent part of how CPD and the mayor's office operates. Not just one-time listening sessions, but real systems where residents' input informs policies and see what changes can occur as a result. In addition, increased transparency through accessible websites with multilingual updates and district level reports. And then, of course, invest in community-based organizations as engagement leaders. The success of this initiative shows that trusted local groups are the best messengers. They know their neighborhoods and can convene residents to help gather meaningful feedback. And in some, these residents told us what they want from police, not more policing, but better engagement. Across neighborhoods, people described officers as disconnected or only visible when something goes wrong. Older adults recall a time where they knew officers by name, and youth today are saying that they feel targeted or ignored. And most importantly, people said policing isn't just about stopping crime, it's about building community trust and respect. And this requires CPD to be proactive and not reactive. And it means treating residents as partners in safety, not as suspects. These insights directly support the mayor's vision for every officer being a community officer and offer a roadmap to make that real in practice. And so this shift towards community engagement, or this shift towards community engaged policing, isn't just about a better strategy. It's about creating the foundation for a healthier, safer, and more connected Chicago. And when residents feel heard, respected, and protected by those who serve them, it strengthens trust and builds a shared commitment to public safety. And there's so much more in the report. I highly recommend to check it out. It's out there, it's published, please share. And with that, I will pass the mic back to Mike Milstein.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosie. Appreciate you. I will now turn it over to the folks from the Civic Consulting Alliance to talk about their work.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Meredith Sparks-Cement, and I'm a principal at Civic Consulting Alliance. We're a nonprofit based here in Chicago, and we provide pro bono consulting services to local government clients, such as CPD, such as strategic planning and project management. So thanks to CPD for inviting us to share today. So one of the things that we did to support this work is conducting interviews and focus groups with several different community stakeholder groups who have a focus on policing and public safety in Chicago. So this included commissioners from the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability, district council members from across the city, member organizations of the Coalition for the Consent Decree, members of CPD's Community Policing Advisory Panel, or CPAP, and chairs of District Advisory Council chairs across the city as well. We asked questions of each of these groups to gather their feedback on what they and their constituents would like to see more of and less of from CPD, as well as future opportunities that they see for CPD to advance community policing. Across all those groups, we heard feedback related to 3 core themes where the community representatives wanted to see more or less of certain behaviors. And those 3 categories are law enforcement functions, relationship building, and performance management. Related to law enforcement functions, community representatives would like to see more of the right response at the right time, or in other words, timely response that is proportionate to the nature of the call. So, for example, we heard emphasis on ensuring that officers de-escalate heightened situations and take down the temperature with their behavior, and ensure that there's equitable treatment across communities, regardless of community demographics such as race. We also heard a strong desire for more sharing of community resources internally within the department and externally with community members. Finally, under law enforcement functions, we heard that community representatives would like to see less use of force and also less time spent by officers on responsibilities outside of enforcement work, so non-enforcement activities. For relationship building, we heard that community representatives would like to see more proactive engagement of community members outside of emergency situations and crises in order to build a foundation of trust between community members and officers in order they can work better together when problems do arise. We heard a lot about wanting to see officers assigned to consistent beats and districts, also known as beat or geographic integrity, and that they also wanted to see officers assigned for the long term in that beat or district to support officers and community members' familiarity with each other and relationships. There was also a strong desire for increased visibility and approachability of officers amongst the groups that we spoke to. For example, officers patrolling on foot or bike that provide an opportunity for organic interactions and engagement with community outside of 911 calls. We also heard a strong emphasis on treating all community members with respect. And finally, ensuring CPD-hosted engagements are meaningful and well attended by both CPD and community members, including CPD members who are not in a designated community policing role, but might be patrol officers in the beat. And then under relationship building, we also heard a desire for less adversarial approaches on the part of officers, and things like less threatening body language, harsh tone of voice, or profanity. In terms of performance management, community stakeholders wanted to see more meaningful and transparent metrics, for example, tied to the priorities in district strategic plans, and also more overall follow-up on cases and community concerns, in addition to more effective communication and feedback loops with community on CPD processes overall. And they'd like to see less fragmentation in terms of community policing strategies, as well as less duplicative community input mechanisms and more effective collaboration between CPD and different community bodies. Finally, there were several opportunities suggested for CPD, including sharing user-friendly and accessible data with the public, especially around use of force and on people in crisis. Additionally, they suggested increasing officer wellness support and training, especially regarding de-escalation and trauma-informed practices, as well as more public safety-related trainings for community members. And finally, we heard that there would be value in a collaborative and comprehensive guide of both government and community resources at the local level that could be used as a tool by both officers as well as to share with community members to make sure that they're aware of resources available within CPD, within city government overall, and with community-based organizations. So with that, Mike, I will pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. I believe I am introducing Anna now to continue.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Catter. I am also from Civic Consulting Alliance, and I want to talk to you all about the feedback that we heard from CPD members. So just about a year ago now at this point, we reached out to about 150 CPD members representing 16 different police districts, all ranks from the superintendent down to beat officers, a mix of sworn and civilian members, and also a mix of tenure folks who have less than 5 years of experience on the job and those who have more than 5 years on the job, in order to really understand how members perceive community policing right now at the department, how they understand the superintendent's vision that every member has a role in community policing, and what it would ultimately take for that vision to come to life. So here you see a summary of some of the takeaways from those interviews and focus groups, and you'll start to hear some repetition in the themes based on what we heard from Rosie and Meredith thus far. In terms of the strengths that members noted about the current state and the future state vision of community policing, folks really were receptive to and appreciative of the value of community policing as a department-wide way of work, as a pervasive philosophy that should inform day-to-day practices. They mentioned concepts and principles like respect and professionalism that you heard from Rosie, like the importance of engaging and solving problems that residents are facing. And really, we heard over and over again sentiments like the quote that you see on the page here: community policing starts with every officer. It is not just the responsibility of a single unit or person. Another strength that we heard is that members see good things happening with community policing already in the department. However, they note that those practices are not necessarily consistently defined or applied in all facets of department operations. We heard members say things like, officers are doing community policing every day. We just don't call it that. Members also did share challenges, things that the department needs to be aware of as it really pursues a pervasive adoption of community policing as the department-wide way of work. The number one thing that we heard was related to staffing challenges. Members expressed that they don't have time between responding to calls for service to really engage with members, community residents, build relationships, and solve problems. We also heard about the lack of geographic integrity as a challenge. Not being staffed in the same geographic location on a consistent basis can make it difficult to get to know the people that members are serving and the communities in which they are working. Members cautioned against one-size-fits-all approaches, recognizing that each community, each district is different. There can't necessarily be a one-size-fits-all approach to community policing. And they also emphasized the importance of officer wellness resources. There were concerns about things like fear of doing something wrong and really craving positive reinforcement and recognition from supervisors when members do something right. However, there was challenges articulated related to direction from headquarters wanting to make sure that expectations were really clear. We also heard about the importance of soft skills, things like communication strategies, a theme that Meredith noted. We heard it from other community representatives. And finally, we did hear about this pressure that some members feel about an expectation to do everything and really wanting to live up to that expectation from community members. That's the gist of the feedback that we heard from CPD members, so I'll pass it back to Mike.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna and Meredith. Appreciate you both. Another key part of this project also included looking at other national leading practices what other agencies across the country are doing. To do so, we worked with 21CP to really do a ton of great work looking at other agencies, other cities, on how they operationalize community-focused policing. And so I'm excited to introduce Christine Cole from 21CP to talk about the work that 21CP did.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here tonight to represent 21CP and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the report we produced. Really, my heart is happy as I listen to these other reports and recognize the overlap from across them. Before I describe our work, I want to first acknowledge the vision of Superintendent Snelling and First Deputy Superintendent Talley for setting the ambitious department-wide community policing goal in Chicago, and certainly for all of you in the community that support it. It's bold, it's difficult, it's challenging work, as well as really inclusive. And for us, really, we see it as the right decision to take. Our report is designed to advise the city on what to think about as you embark on this goal, rather than providing a specific recipe or implementation guide. What we've produced is a report that reviewed 17 peer agencies about their experiences with implementing and managing community policing. And we distilled those responses into themes that reflect the major components of successful initiatives. What we know from our work is that there are a few core components that really are must-haves or non-negotiables to set the table right for success. The first one, and it's listed here, is establish geographic integrity. You've heard that from some of the other speakers, both the wishes of officers as well as community members. Officers' assignments must be stable and reliable. This certainly may require organizational changes to accomplish, and it always demands careful attention to scheduling. These steady assignments allow the community to get to know the officers, and in turn for the officers to learn about who lives and works in those neighborhoods, what the values are, what the issues are in that neighborhood, and certainly to build a trusting relationship. As you heard from Superintendent Talley, officers need to be in the community. The second one listed here, develop collaborative solutions to address the root cause. I shorten that to participatory problem solving. This is about working together collaboratively to both identify the problem and possible solutions. You heard Superintendent Talley say a few minutes ago the same thing. The source of problems is often different than the call for service that comes in. Repeated calls for neighborhood disruptions could be gang activity when you dig down deeply, or even a human trafficking ring, or something like an absentee landlord who's neglecting trash and health and business building codes and tenant management. Problem identification and solving must be done in concert with all your stakeholders, right? It's the police, it's the community, it's your NGOs, and certainly other parts of government. Leadership support and dedicated capacity. Instituting department-wide community policing requires not only the support you already have from department leadership, but also a commitment to doing things inside the department, like training officers, supervisors, and community members. Recognizing the necessary but often difficult changes that you might need to make in your general operating practices, the status quo, right? Perhaps organizational changes are necessary. We have to reassign people sometimes. And certainly you have to enforce the beat integrity. Creating a dedicated implementation team that's going to make this happen and stick is another part of what we're talking about when we say dedicated capacity. Some other key takeaways that are worth mentioning. You've heard this already this evening. Community policing can't be a specialty unit. When it is, it's everyone else's responsibility, right? And it's not the responsibility of the patrol division or the patrol units. With a philosophy that extends from call takers to the assignment unit to detectives and patrol officers and certainly leadership, community policing becomes the way you do business, the way you think about your work. That's the way this takes on hold and sticks. Another thing is, Leadership, I say we must be specific about what we want officers to do and give them the right tools and training to succeed. We can't say do community policing. We need to explain what to do at a beat meeting and how to do it. What behavior is expected of my community policing time, and how to identify and engage others in problem solving. We know that when we provide the specifics, officers are both more willing and more successful in their community policing efforts. In our review, we found one department that teaches what they call structured dialogue. An example of this is at the end of every encounter, officers are instructed to say, is there anything else I can do for you before I leave? This often produces not only the start of a relationship, but often more information and more details about what's going on. And though we talk and emphasize the importance of department-wide implementation and not a specialty unit doing community policing, we think it's really important, and we see this across the country as we reviewed other agencies. Having a central department-wide coordination is really beneficial. Having a group that can focus on the department-wide implementation, focus on data collection, reporting, administration, coordination, and tracking of efforts that go beyond a tour of duty or must leverage multiple external partners really helps. A few final thoughts. Community policing is not the same as community engagement. And I understand that some members of the community prefer community engagement policing, and that makes good sense. Community engagement is a critical component and necessary part of community policing. Community policing is a way to prevent and solve crimes and a strategy for improving safety. Engagement is the way you do that. Community policing in Chicago will look different than in any of the other jurisdictions we studied. It should. It has to. Community policing in Chicago will evolve, will grow, and mature and change over time. Good luck to all of you. Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Appreciate you and all the work that 21CP did on this. So I think now if we transition to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of talk briefly about, now that we've heard from the different reports, the different inputs that came in this first phase, what we heard across all three inputs, what we've heard across, both what our members shared, what community shared, and what we saw in some of the leading practices. And I think what we were really surprised and happy to see is that there was actually a lot of significant similarities. In fact, probably a lot more similarities than there were differences across what we heard from all three different groups of stakeholders. And really at the core of it, a lot of commonalities in terms of defining what community policing means and how it should be done and what the department needs to do to ensure that this happens. So, some of the things just to highlight here on the slide, on the left side, what is the work of community policing? We heard a lot about, that there's a need to better define community policing as the entire department's way of work, not just a standalone program, really needing to have better geographic presence that helps cultivate those interpersonal relationships between police and community members that we serve, better direction of unstructured time, and really trying to focus on how we integrate problem solving and community building as part of the work of every officer and part of the work of the day-to-day duties of every officer. And then how do we have feedback? What is the feedback loops? What are those mechanisms? And how do we make sure that when we are doing feedback, it's done in a meaningful way? How should this work of community policing be done? Thinking about, what is the right response at the right time when we're responding for calls for service, making sure that our officers and department members are visible, that they're approachable, so that they can proactively engage community in non-enforcement settings, and then leveraging and working closely with other district and city resources to ensure that there's more of a holistic response and a holistic support system for folks that we come into contact with. And then how do you obviously it starts with buy-in, having leadership that's invested into this work and leadership that's invested into the community, clear and comprehensive policy and procedures around community engagement and problem solving, investing in member wellness and training resources, and implementing empirical and accessible performance management strategies, both internally and externally. So, really with all of this feedback, moving on to the next slide, we really try to take a lot of this feedback and articulate 3 really foundational elements of community-based policing, which is what we are sharing here on the screen. And what I would like to clear that it's really a working draft of the philosophy. This is kind of what we try to develop so far based on the feedback at this point of this project. But a big piece of what this next round of engagement is going to include is, does this make sense? Does this slide and this guiding philosophy that we're looking at, does this actually resonate? Does this sound right? And so, while we're talking about it tonight, I want to make it clear that this is still a working draft, and that we want to continue to engage community, engage you all about your thoughts on this, and how we continue to implement this. But just to kind of share more about, what this is and how we got here, it's really that we've outlined it, which is, really kind of thinking about that hard set, that mindset, and that skill set. Starting with the hard set, the why all CPD members took this honor and duty, why we are here to help people to take care of our neighborhoods and our cities, really having that hard set that, we are part of the communities that we serve. And hoping that, in order to implement that hard set, that there's a mindset that accompanies it, a mindset that is really rooted in reliability, empathy, service, professionalism, empowerment, communication, and time, all together spelling respect. And then, making sure that, our officers have the skill sets that they need to implement this philosophy. That skill set of, working in partnership with community, building trusting relationships with community, collaboratively identifying and resolving safety-related concerns and problems. And those tools and those skill sets of being able to listen to your community, develop solutions with community, and follow through in your community. And so really, in order to further develop this and ensure that our members are supported by a tool set of resources that can help them be successful, we're going to continue to be reviewing operations across the department to determine where we need to make adjustments or to this day-to-day reality for all of our members. So moving on to the next slide here. What we want to make clear is that there is not necessarily a detailed plan quite yet about what this next phase looks like. I think that's what, we want to continue to work with community on, where we want your input on more is, as we continue to build this plan over the next couple of months, what does this look like? Where do we need to do? How do we make sure that this work, this skill sets, these mindsets, these hard sets are operationalized? And again, we want to make sure that, all of you and folks across the city are able to be involved in helping us guide that workflow. So starting later this week and through the summer, we'll be gathering community feedback through several mechanisms. This includes a written survey, which is also right now live through June 27th, and additional input sessions across the city. These are publicly posted on our website, and we'll talk more about where to find all of that in the next couple of slides. But with this input, it will continue to inform our operational plans. We will continue to work with support from the Civic Consulting Alliance, who are currently reviewing current operations of the department so that we can determine adjustments that need to be made to support this philosophy. These are things that are in line with the department strategic plan that the superintendent recently put out, as well as the consent decree. And really what that work will focus on is, defining the what. What is the work of community policing, community focused policing? Is it, it's department wide? Is it, how does it work in a particular district, problem solving and community feedback? Determining the who. So who will do the work both internally at CPD and in collaboration with external partners? The design, how will the department implement these changes through supporting systems like data tracking and metrics? What are those metrics that we need to look at to measure success? And then what are those implementation plans, making sure that our implementation plans are consistent with our consent decree, that they're consistent with our goals from the CCPSA, and that they're really consistent with ensuring that they help to operationalize the philosophy and the hard set, mindset, and skill sets that we're working towards. So there are many related initiatives that are also underway that we also want to talk about. Obviously, folks may be aware of the workforce allocation study, which we'll talk about in a second. In-service trainings that are also ongoing throughout the year, where every member is required to go throughout the year to training on youth engagement, cultural understanding, impartial and community policing. developing new supervisor training programs to build leadership skills, reviewing and updating district strategic plans, expanding citywide community engagement on reform and citywide policies, and then a new CPD website, which includes open access to crime and arrest data. So, where we're at right now, obviously, April 2025, summer 2025, we're gearing up to start the next process here of community engagement, where we want to continue to work with you all and get your feedback on how we actually continue to operationalize this work. And we will talk about how to get more involved in just a few minutes. But before we get there, I want to pass it over and introduce Chelsea Diaz from the department, who's going to talk briefly just about the current workforce allocation project and how it's aligning with this community focused policing project.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am Chelsea Diaz, a projects administrator in the Reform Management Unit at CPD, and I'm currently assisting Executive Director Clark Hinson, as well as the Matrix Consulting Group with the Workforce Allocation Study. Tonight, I will be speaking about the study's connection to the community-focused policing project that you've heard so much about tonight. As we advance our work in community-focused policing, it's critical to emphasize that this is not happening in a vacuum. When we talk about community policing, building trust, solving problems, and showing up for neighborhoods, it's important to remember that these efforts depend on how CPD assigns and supports its officers. If we want officers to have time to connect with residents, attend local events, or work on long-term safety solutions, we need to make sure that we're staffing the department in a way that allows for that. That is why community-focused policing is directly tied to the workforce allocation study. This study is helping us take a fresh look at staffing, how many officers are in each neighborhood, whether they stay in the same areas long enough to build those relationships, and how their time is used when they're not answering 911 calls. We're also looking at whether some duties could be handled by civilian staff to free up officers for more community engagement. The big idea is this: to make community policing real, CPD has to be structured and staffed to support it. And your input helps us make smart, community-informed decisions about where officers go, what they focus on, and how we build a department that serves all Chicagoans effectively and fairly. We can go to the next slide, Meredith. So the workforce allocation study is the first exploratory step in making sure our officers are assigned to the right places, that they have the right support to meet the needs of Chicago's neighborhoods. This study looks closely at how many officers are in each area, who they report to, and whether they're working consistently in the same neighborhoods so that they can build real relationships with the people they serve. It's also about making sure that we have enough staff, both sworn and civilian, to meet demand, whether that's responding to emergencies, solving problems, or engaging with the community. This work is required under the consent decree, which holds CPD accountable for reform and transparency. And just as importantly, it is shaped by community input. That means when you tell us what's working or what's missing, your voice helps guide how officers are deployed and how they show up in your neighborhood. Our goal is not just to respond to calls for service, but to support long-term safety by being visible, approachable, and focused on what matters most to each community. The study focuses on 6 main goals. The first is stronger supervision, making sure each supervisor oversees no more than 10 officers and that this supervisor stays consistent. And this is also a component that's laid out in the consent decree. The second is consistent assignments. So you've heard about geographic integrity tonight. This is that callback to that key theme where officers will regularly work in the same neighborhoods and know their communities. The third is the right staffing where it's needed. This is based on things like crime, calls for service, and response times. The fourth is supporting community policing. This is aligning with CPD's neighborhood engagement goals and is again focused on that uncommitted time for officer visibility, relationship building, and problem solving. The fifth is the identification of staffing gaps. So figuring out where there aren't enough people to get the job done and where we can pull resources that are already available to be able to fill those gaps. And then finally, the sixth is using civilians when possible so that officers can focus on police work and other staff can take on roles that don't require sworn officers. But overall, it's about making sure that the department is staffed in a way that supports safety, accountability, and community trust. This study will be a year-long intensive review with final recommendations coming at the end of 2025, as you heard earlier by the first deputy superintendent. We look forward to continued partnership with the community through more engagements like this. And I thank you for being here tonight for this update. If you would like more information on the workforce allocation study specifically, project updates and key documents specific to this study are available on our workforce allocation webpage. You can find the link to that page at the top of the CPD Transform website, which if you don't know how the link to that, you can just Google CPD Transform and it should be the first one that pops up. I will now pass it off to Director Glenn Brooks, who will provide more information on the opportunities for input this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for taking your time out this evening to spend with us as we share some of the continued improvements and exciting developments in community policing. So listen, this thing really does not happen without your input, your insight. There's no one better that knows the community than the people who live there. And we will be conducting a series of live in-person engagements along with with some live in-person engagements and some surveys to solicit some feedback about this plan as we begin to develop the plan. And I think Mike mentioned it earlier that this plan isn't finalized. The key component of this plan is your insight and wisdom. So we'll have a series of engagement session, and I'm going to bring up the list here in a second. But this is key what we're going to be looking at or looking for at those engagement sessions where you'll be able to give your input. We want to know, what should officers know before engaging the community? What history, what understanding should they know about your community, which is key for them to better engage with the community? What should new officers be introduced to your local resources? What resources, what assets are in the neighborhood today that we should make sure that we make every officer knowledgeable about? What CPD-led engagement best for positive connections between community members and CPD? How can we do this better? Is one of the central questions that we need answered, particularly when it comes to our engagement. How do you want to shape your district priorities in your neighborhood? Currently, we actively, every fall, we go out and look for those priorities that the community wants, and we sit down and we talk about it. But really, is there a better method for us to do that? Is there a better way that you want to ensure that the police department understands your priorities, your safety priorities for the neighborhoods? What activities should officers prioritize in 911 calls? Which calls should we be, your input on which calls we should be coming to first is absolutely critical as we make a better department. And where should they patrol and for what purpose? What areas are you seeing that need more attention from the police? And how do you get that information to us? Those are things that we'll be looking at the engagement sessions that will be coming up throughout this summer. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So you see here before you a list of citywide engagements that are happening all across the city. These are happening at all hours of the day, whether it be that afternoon or evening, to best address the time that you are available. And please know that you can attend any one of these engagements, whether that is a virtual engagement or a real life engagement, and give your insight and your wisdom. They will begin, the first one will begin this Saturday in Pilsen, and they will go all the way through June 17th up in Edgewater. I couldn't remember the neighborhood, at the Broadway Youth Center. So all these are opportunities for you to give your engagement. We look forward to seeing you in person or online. And more importantly, we look forward to your insight and wisdom. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for being out here tonight. Mike?
Great. Thank you, Director Brooks. Appreciate that. We have a few minutes left. I want to be respectful of everyone's time this evening, but we do want to try to answer or address a couple of questions that came in either in the registration or through the Q&A. The first question that I'll pose, and this is, I guess, posed to probably the CPD staff here, is if you can talk more about how community policing, as currently defined, serves to reduce violent crime or how it could reduce violent crime.
All right, Glenn, we'll do this as a team effort. So I'll start and then I'll turn it over to my partner, Glenn Brooks. So community policing is incredibly important, and I'm going to talk about specifically how we use it to reduce violent crime. And then Director Brooks will add a little more nuance to those things. When we look at violent crime and the role of community policing, it starts early on before a disorder problem becomes a violent crime concern. And how do they do that? They address it first by ensuring that there is outreach and awareness to members of the community. Number one, are there people we can touch and provide resources to help prevent that crime? Number two, can we make communities aware based on data-driven information to let people know what is going on in their neighborhoods? Next would be intervention. What are the things that we can do to intervene, such as providing resources, conducting flyer campaigns, ensuring we can occupy a space and remove the opportunity for crime to occur there, ensure that we're doing it at the right time to take away any opportunity afforded by time. Second, it supports what is done in enforcement, and the detective division handles the investigation. And once again, community policing returns to support those victims, whether to crime victim services, domestic violence advocate services, and also helping to identify what resources, whether local or what the city provides, to support those victims. All of those that support what the patrol division and detective division do sits inside those community policing offices. What this initiative hopes to accomplish is how do we get that knowledge and that information out to every officer so they are conducting their work with communities in mind and being able to apply all of that to ensure we're supporting on the front end and on the back end. Director Brooks, do you have anything else to add?
So I want to add, we do want to do this systematically, and one of the ways that we do it systematically is we try to be present, and a lot of times that might look at our beat meetings, that might look at community meetings, but physically being in a place where we can interact with people in a one-on-one situation. The beat meetings are really designed to identify those problems, particularly around violence, and how we can address it from multiple angles, not just with enforcement, but is there anything that we can do with a particular building or business? Is there anything as a community we can do to increase the positive aspects of that community, kind of shutting off some of those negative assets? I'll give you an example. Positive alerting has been a staple in the toolkit of community policing, where residents occupy the space around their communities where they've been having issues with the police officers, so we can positively and safely take over that physical space where we're seeing violence. The other thing that I really want to stress is partnerships. We can see those partnerships working with our faith-based institutions. We can see it working with other civic and educational institutions. We can also see it with working with community violence interrupters to help address these particular violence issues. A combination of all those things, but most importantly, and the cornerstone of it, is working together with our community to address that violence that they're seeing in a coordinated fashion. And we're going to always lean on our traditional law enforcement activities. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Director. I know we are at 6:30. I'll just pose one last question due to time here. And again, I did put an email in the chat for folks if you have additional questions that we weren't able to get to tonight because of timing. Please feel free to reach out to us via email at community@chicagopolice.org. I've also included the link to all the information that we discussed this evening. But maybe just the final question is how and in what capacity can community members get more involved?
Director Brooks, you want to start with this one? And
Yeah. So one of the primary ways to get involved with the Chicago Police Department is your district community policing office. And the reason I say that is, number one, they're going to know about all the engagement opportunities throughout the district and ones that might best meet your interests and needs. Second of all, you can engage with a number of our partners. You have a number of the CBOs who are conducting the community engagement for this project. That's also an excellent way to get civically engaged with the department. We work with a number of organizations. So there's kind of twofold, and it's kind of where your comfort level is. But you can always call your district community policing office, and there's opportunities, whether it's a beat meeting, whether it's working on a problem-solving strategy, or whether it's engaging in some community building activities. We are always looking for opportunities, and that goes from all age range, from our young people to our older adults. We want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to engage with us. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add on a more granular level on this project is look at the dates when these events are being held. Please, if you have the time to come in and share your input with us, please do so. Also, if you don't have that opportunity, there was a QR code posted. Please go to that QR code, fill out the survey, and answer the survey there if you're unable to attend. The more voices and the more diversity in thought that we can have as input, it'll help us build what community policing, how we improve it, how we make it more effective and efficient is guided by what you share with us. On a side note, I'm also going to invite everybody, if you have the opportunity to be part of the TCAC, which is the Training Community Advisory Committee, you can as well, as we revamp our community policing training, you can participate there as well. Also, when any of our policies go into get posted for comment, you could also provide your input there. We want to hear from your voices. We need your voices to guide. What we're trying to do here is make every officer a community policing officer with your input. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Director. Before we do close out, I do want to acknowledge we do have more questions that I do see coming in through the Q&A. But I also know that we are a little over time. So what we'll do is we've taken down all the questions that have come in through the Q&A that we were not able to answer, as well as other questions that came in through the registration. We'll be reaching out to folks via email if we have to answer those questions after this evening. So I apologize, we're not able to get to all the questions, but please know we do see your question. And we'll respond to you all via email later this evening. But again, just to close out, we want to thank everyone for being here tonight, for your participation, and looking forward to seeing everyone at some of the upcoming engagements. Again, that link is in the chat. And if there are other questions that you had that you weren't able to ask or get answered to today, please feel free to reach out to us via email at any point. But thank you again to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.